Hi, everyone. Welcome to this podcast where we're going to be discussing how to make education systems inclusive, supportive, and safe for all learners, also including lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, and intersex children and youth. I'm Rubén Ávila. My pronouns are they, them, and I work as policy and research manager here at IGLYO. And here with us today, we have activists and human rights advocates, and they will be bringing their views on this topic of inclusive education and school bullying and harassment from their own perspective and experiences. So if that's okay with you, let's do a quick round to introduce ourselves. Erin, welcome to the podcast.
My name is Erin Vlahović. I am trans and intersex man, also co-chair of IGLYO and executive and intersex coordinator in Croatian organization TransAid.
Well, thanks, Erin. Matteo, you want to go?
Yeah, hi, I'm Matteo. I'm the policy and research officer at IGLYO. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a trans person.
Well, many thanks. It's a pleasure, and I think it's a privilege to have you with us today. It's not so common that we have the chance to sit together and think of a better future jointly, so it's very nice having you here. So let's start. May 17th marks the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia, and Intersex Phobia, the IDAHOBIT Day. For us, it's important that on this day, we talk about youth. There's going to be many discussions throughout this week about discrimination faced by LGBTQI people, about violence, harassment, the protection of rights, the backlash that we as queer people are experiencing in the promotion of our own rights across Europe. But we don't know to which extent youth are going to be represented in those discussions. And we think it is crucial. Just to bring some numbers, like we know that the Agency for the Fundamental Rights of the European Union has published a survey recently, and we see that young people, especially trans and intersex people, are the ones that have felt more discriminated against and that experience higher rates of harassment and violence. We know that these levels of discrimination, harassment, and violence are unacceptably high, but we also know that most of this happens in schools or like these acts are perpetrated by school or colleagues. So we think it's very important to talk about this issue, to talk about inclusive education. That's why IGLYO has joined the GEM Report team to launch a policy paper on inclusive education. The paper, you can download it, talks about what needs to be done to make education systems safe, inclusive, and supportive for LGBTQI young people. But today we wanted to hear it from young activists, from young people themselves. So let's start this off. Matteo, the policy paper also talks about the specific barriers faced by trans, gender non-conforming, and non-binary people in schools. As a trans activist yourself, what do you think schools, teachers, and other students should do to make education institutions safe for everyone?
Hi, Ruben. Thank you so much for the question. So I think that it's really important to highlight that in order to make schools inclusive for trans and gender non-conforming students, there needs to be policies that make schools inclusive for all students. School needs to be inclusive and safe. So the main issue is having effective anti-bullying policies. And then delving more into trans-specific issues, there are many, but I think that one very key issue is the possibility for students to have gender recognition, like gender self-determination. And so for schools and ministries of education to have gender self-determination for students of all ages as a policy is built within the school system. And what does this mean in practice is that students need to be able to have their name on the registry, have their pronouns, their chosen pronouns respected by teachers and other students, have their names in the student cards, and also schools need to have flexible and trans-inclusive uniform policies. In addition, I think that it's really important that gender segregated spaces are discussed with trans students, and there is no strict policy excluding trans students. I also believe that teachers really need to be trained in the application of these policies, because what we are seeing right now is that there is an increase in LGBTQI inclusive policies and trans inclusive policies, but there is not an increase in teacher training in LGBTQI inclusive teacher training. So if we have trans inclusive policies, but teachers are not, teachers have no idea how to apply them, then it doesn't really make sense to have them, because they don't make a difference. So I think that these are the two main issues for trans and gender non-conforming students, and also the inclusion and the representation of trans and gender diverse people in the curricula in a non-pathologizing way.
Yeah, thank you, Matteo. That's very important. And I fully agree with you that teacher today, if these policies don't go together with teacher training, but also like school staff training to put those things in place, like I fully agree there's something. And same with curricula. If you have these policies, but then that's not included, you're not represented in the curricula, or you're represented in a pathologizing way, then yeah, like it doesn't help at all. Thank you, Matteo, very much. Well, Erin, one of the problems we face when discussing inclusive education is a lack of data. This lack of information is even higher, and you know that when it comes to intersex children. As I was saying before, the few data that are available show that trans and intersex youth face higher rates of discrimination and violence. From your perspective, what should change to make education inclusive, safe, and supportive also for intersex people?
Speaking from my personal experience, but I think that I may speak generally when I say that the majority of us haven't even heard the word intersex in our schools, may say enough about inclusivity of educational system. I think that intersex people must be constructively included in educational curriculum, especially without being described or mentioned in pathological or especially mythological way. Schools also must provide safe spaces for any individual, any young person who maybe does not conform with the stereotypical or even expected female or male norm. It's also crucial to include intersex in sex education. The notion that only two sexes exist, or that there are only two boxes that one individual can fit, also increases the feeling of shame, secrecy, and also feeling of being less valid, especially in such a vulnerable age.
Yeah. Well, many thanks, Erin. Today, as I was saying, is the IDAHOBIT Day. So what is the message that you would just like send for ministers of education? What role do you think that young people should have in discussing inclusive education policies and practices? And how should that be taken into consideration when designing legislation and policies and everything for inclusive education? You want to go first, Matteo?
Yes, so I think that it's really important that LGBTQI youth is allowed to advocate for themselves. And within that framework, I'll sneak in the trans-specific issue. So gender self-determination is really important. Young people have a right to decide, have a right to have their voice heard. And this includes having the right to have their name respected and their identity respected in their daily life in schools.
Thank you.
For my message, I would like to quote Nelson Mandela, who said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Including LGBTQI people in educational system is really changing the world, especially for us LGBTQI people. Also, please include LGBTQI people in making that change. Please listen to our voices, especially voices of us young people, because we are the ones living this, and we are the ones who really knows how it feels to be excluded, and we really know what we need and what would make this world a better place for us. So please listen to us.
Well, okay, yes, indeed, youth participation is vital. All plans, policies, and legislation to make schools inclusive, safe, and supportive of LGBTQI learners, as Erin was saying, should actively involve LGBTQI youth through co-design and consultation. We believe in that. So thank you, Erin, for that. We've come to the end of this podcast. Thanks for being here, and thanks for bringing awareness to this issue and bringing your own perspective. We've discussed many things. We've talked about inclusive curricula, teacher training, anti-discrimination legislation, and policies. So to everyone listening at home, thank you for your time as well. We encourage youth in particular to engage with the All Means All campaign, and everyone listening, whether you're a school staff, a policymaker, an activist, a human rights advocate, we encourage you to download a new policy paper that IGLYO and GEM Report have produced on the inclusive education system globally. So thank you very much. Have a lovely day, and see you soon. Take care.